In this demo, we'll walk through the full process of enabling Azure CDN for our blob service through the Azure portal, as well as looking at common configuration options. We'll verify the CDN was set up correctly and then remove it to prepare for the next demo. Alright, we're back in the Azure portal and I opened our demo storage account. To enable Azure CDN, we'll scroll down in the blade navigation here and choose Azure CDN under Blob Service. In this section here, we'll set up a new Azure CDN profile and endpoint. One thing to note is that Azure CDN stores endpoints within what's called a CDN profile. A CDN profile is a good way to organize related endpoints for an application, business group, or another logical grouping. Let's give it a name. We'll choose the standard Akamai pricing tier for our CDN. This means that we won't get any premium features, but that's okay for our demo. And we'll give it the same endpoint name. You could use a different endpoint name rather than your storage account name. It's the URL that you're going to use to access content over the CDN. In my case, I just want to keep it consistent. And then we'll leave the origin host name because it's automatically filled in with our storage blob endpoint. So let's create it. Alright, so we just had to wait a little bit and now Azure's created our CDN profile and endpoint. We can see it right up here. Let's go ahead and click on it. The CDN endpoint is also a separate resource, so you can also search for it here in the top bar. On this blade, we can see some configuration options, so let's look at the origin section first. Okay, there's a few options here that I want you to take note of. First, this origin type is of type storage. That doesn't really mean anything except that it powers this dropdown here for origin hostname, so it'll automatically show you the blob account endpoints. The other thing that we need configured is the origin host header. This has to match exactly the blob endpoint URL, otherwise Azure Storage will refuse the request. Under origin path, we could configure a subpath or container, like our static site container, but for now we'll just leave it blank. The other tip I'll mention is to just disable HTTP totally and only enable HTTPS. It's really just a good practice. We're moving to the secure web, and as a bonus, Azure uses a wildcard SSL certificate for all endpoints, so that's no extra cost to you. If you do end up using a custom domain, you'd need your own SSL certificate, of course. We won't spend time looking at other CDN configuration here because that's a bit beyond the scope of this course, but we will verify that our CDN endpoint is set up appropriately. Let's save our changes. Great, now let's hop on back over to the overview page. The endpoint hostname is the public URL we'll use to test our demo site, so let's click it. Okay, we're getting an error. Well, the problem is that there's no content that exists at the root of our blob storage. So we will need to type the container name and then the file name to access index.html. And there we go, here's our demo site. A good question you might be asking yourself is, in the case of this static website, is it possible to avoid forcing the user to type in the index document and container folder? Yes, there is, but we'll take a look at enabling static sites through blob storage later on. Let's go back to the portal and we want to delete this profile and endpoint. To find the profile, let's go to the resource group and then find the profile, and let's go ahead and delete that. This will delete both the profile and the endpoint together. You can see in the portal the endpoint is sort of stuck around. Let's go ahead and refresh, and there you can see it's gone away. Alright, we have a clean slate for the next demo.